Hello everyone and welcome to Core 2. That's right, it's a new game with no tanks. Now, this episode I actually have to explain, or I think I have to spend some time explaining why this challenge is actually going to be so terrifying. So, let's set up the game. 1943, highest difficulty. Got my combat randomness down to 10%. Just enough to fudge the numbers, but not to make randomness a critical factor. Limited stock, of course, because we like limited stock. This actually makes things considerably harder for us in 1943, because this is where the infantry transitions from the infantry that you've been using the whole campaign to the 1943 variant infantry, which is much better. That means I'm going to be very limited on infantry in a campaign where I'm relying on infantry. So, I may have to use non-1943 infantry simply because I just don't have enough 1943 infantry to go around. But anyway, let us import our core. And then we're going to talk about a very critical point in how this game plays. It's a bit of a shift. This is where the game is supposed to become all about tanks. And we're not going to use any tanks in this challenge. At all. No tanks. Right, let's think about our traits. We're going to take Infantry General. I wouldn't normally take it, but since we're not using any tanks, it's become a lot better. As always, I don't think I'm going to need artillery, but we will grab industry connections. Industry connections could be really good or really bad for us, because in 1943 you start to see a lot of new tanks, which we can't use. But also new artillery and new anti-tank units. And new aircraft. Those things would be super useful. But we'll get more into that as we go along. But I have plenty of artillery to use. But we'll discuss the issues with artillery soon. I got plenty in stock, so I'm not going to need any more. So it's an easy pick for me. Think I'll be alright with not taking anything else. Right. Always love my Master of Blitzkrieg, but we got no tanks, so that's kind of useless. Let's go with Terrain Expert. You know, I'm almost tempted to go with Old Guard, which is a trait that just basically prevents your units from being killed. And that is a real concern when you have no tanks. Wow, forced concentration. That would be super spicy. 4 heroes on a unit would be incredibly spicy. I think I won't touch that just on the grounds that it's actually kind of ridiculous. Auxiliaries. Aggressive deployment could be super useful considering that we have no tanks. Delayed reinforcements would be absolutely horrible. So would poor ground control. Though I have run poor ground control before. With no tanks, it would be even worse. Never accept surrender. It's a pretty brutal trait. What can we do here? I want to move on to the discussion of tanks here, but I need, you know, this is a very critical thing to decide on. I don't think I'm going to be splitting many units, to be fair. This is the obvious pick, but I fear it may make things too comically easy. I want to take the auxiliary force is also another thing that can potentially make things very easy. Especially since you can basically deploy free, quote-unquote, recon planes without paying the slots for them. Let's go with deep recon for a laugh. It's not going to be super OP. Alright, the report will have to wait. Manstein has arrived. Yep, the trying times are here indeed. Two fronts, yes, and the second front is closing in on me as we speak. High Command is coming here in person. Is it true that General Edmund's command is at less than 30% strength? Alright. Please supply security for my meeting. I've actually played this mission before. I played the first couple of missions because I made a trailer, so... I should take my leave of you. My safety and the safety of High Command itself is in your hands, Herr General. We are in charge of security for this most high-level meeting. Destroy entire first wave of Soviet tanks. Ignore exhausted forces in the southeast. None of my units are deployed for some reason. Maybe it's a bug. It's supposed to automatically deploy all your stuff. As a final reminder, we should not spend any time or effort to free up the majority of our army. Even if we could free them for combat, there's no fuel or ammunition for them to assist us. Right. Ooh, lethal attack. Sweet. Right, first things first. Wow, our field repairs heroes are not going to be so useful, are they? Let's go ahead and unassign them. Man, look at all these tanks. All these sweet tanks we won't be using. Okay. So, throughout the war, throughout the game, tanks are pretty bad in the early phase of the war. And the reason why is that infantry beats them, artillery beats them, aircraft beat them, and they beat each other. So the only thing that they're reliably good against is recon cars and units that don't fight back and infantry out in the open. Now, this is the moment where everything changes. And if we look at my units, it's sort of easy to explain why. We've got some 43 infantry here, but we don't have much of it, so we'll have to be careful. Right. So in the early war, you'll see tanks here have got around 14 ground defense. Up to 16, up to 19. And now the Tigers are arriving and they've got 25 ground defense. 22. But your average tank's got about 20, 24. And you'll notice here that all these tanks have got no close combat defense, but the Panther has got 4 points. And so is the Tiger. So have the Tigers. So, here's the issue. The trusty 15cm gun does 21 hard attack. And the 21cm gun does 31. Now, if you're following the rule of 10, what that means is that once the tanks start hitting 21 ground defense, the 15cm gun starts to become worthless. If your attack is lower than their defense, you are going to maybe get a kill at best. Now, that's not been an issue for a long time because the ground defense has always been lower than 21. But now tanks are starting to be introduced with 22, 23, 25 ground defense. Now, not only is that enough ground defense to make 15cm artillery a lot less useful, but the 21cm artillery only has 31 hard attack. And yes, that's a lot. But with 25 ground defense, as demonstrated by our Tigers here, that's still only 6 above, which means that you're going to do, on average, 60% of your shots, 60% kills on shots that hit. So if every shot hits, or every attack hits, 60% of those are going to be damaging. Now, with an artillery, of course, that's going to be only 2, you're going to get like 2 kills and 4 suppression. Not given anything special about it. So this is the phase of the war where tanks start to be able to resist artillery strongly. Like 15cm guns start to become useless, 21cm guns start to struggle. So, one of the great predators of tanks, well-defended artillery, is suddenly not so dangerous anymore, or not dangerous at all. Then, you always had to worry about infantry in close combat tiles. Now you'll notice here that the infantry's hard attack 9 and the 43 variant 13. You'll see here 11 on the full scrim. On the mountain troops. Full scrim is also 11. I think Pioneer's 12. Yeah, 12. So you'll notice that the infantry's hard attack has gone up by about 4 points. But the tank's close combat defense has also risen to 4 points. Or by 4 points. you're starting to get tanks now that actually have close combat defense. And what that means is, or the way the calculations work out, it means that tanks are starting to not just be flat out completely slaughtered by infantry in city tiles. They're actually being able to survive some damage. You know, presuming that you don't have a vigilance hero and you're not just blocking out your ground defense at 22. So, while it doesn't, you know, your close defense goes up by 4 and their attack goes up by 4, that seems like an even trade. It's not an even trade. It actually, it aids the tanks somewhat. Because the infantry itself, its defense is not improving. Or, well, it's barely improving. So you can see here, your basic engineers have got 6 ground defense and 8 close defense. And the 43 variant has 8 ground defense and 10 close combat defense. So it's only gone up 2 points. So the bottom line is that tanks become more readily able to kill infantry, but infantry does not in any way gain any real more capability to kill tanks. Their damage to tanks is about the same, but they get killed more easily. So tanks are starting to ignore artillery. They're starting to completely dominate infantry like they didn't already dominate infantry in the right tiles. But they're also starting to be capable against infantry in the wrong tiles. And tanks have always dominated recon cars and anti-aircraft guns that are exposed, with the exception of the 8.8 flak, but even so, if that's exposed, it can still be run down. And noting that the 8.8 flak in anti-tank mode, I think has, I want to say 24 or 28 hard attack off the top of my head. And tanks are starting to overcome that value as well. Most of the anti-tank guns are also quite low on hard attack. And they've always been vulnerable to being directly attacked by tanks. Anti-tank guns are effective against tanks when the tanks attack the thing that they're protecting, not when the tank directly goes after them. So the bottom line is, the only thing that is truly effective against tanks at this point in the war is other tanks and aircraft. Aircraft are the only thing that remain very effective against tanks because their air defense does not improve that much. They still offer 12 air defense for a Tiger here, or 15 for the Tiger 1. And early tanks have got poor scores. So 15 seems like a huge improvement. But tactical bombers especially really start to, and strategic bombers really start to gain attack power against tanks. Although, even with that said, multi-role planes and fighter planes also lose their effectiveness against tanks. So you are using very specific things against tanks, i.e., dive bombers. So, the long and short of it, or the long-winded thing, is that tanks just start to dominate everything at this point in the game. And that's precisely why we're not going to use them. Now, we are going to follow the idea that we're not going to use tanks, the modern definition of tanks. So that's going to include things that are in different categories that are tanks. And not include things that are in the tank category that aren't tanks. Though the number of those things is pretty low. Where's the other 0 slots here are gone? I'm actually using too many slots right now, so I can't deploy anything. There it is. We gained an extra lethal attack hero, that's really cool. Right, I don't have any aircraft in this list. You can't use aircraft on this mission anyway. Might as well leave the aircraft only heroes where they are. Okay, the other lethal heroes must be on these artillery, I guess. Yeah, okay. Let's go ahead and shuffle that one away. Fast deployment. Kloss. Where's that one guy who's got counter artillery? Pretty sure I had a counter artillery hero. There it is. These two combine together to add counter artillery to the one unit that can actually gain some benefit out of it. Okay. Let's put lethal on this one too. Let's put fast deployment on this one too. Don't I have a like half slots hero lying around somewhere? Okay, they're already on units somewhere. But on which unit? Oh. Yeah, that doesn't make any sense. That doesn't make any sense. Right, we'll talk about what is a tank and what isn't a tank in a second. Let me just finish filling around with my setup here. Obviously I want half slots on this because these are expensive slots wise. So it makes perfect sense to keep them cheap. This is my only anti-tank that's actually any good. First strike and field repairs. I might save this for a different anti-tank. This one's got plenty of anti-tank capability just all by itself. There's reduced slots because he's expensive. Right, okay, that's that done. Alright, so let's talk about tanks. Let's talk about tanks. What do I mean by a tank? We'll use the modern definition, which is a tracked vehicle with a turret that rotates, that has a main gun of some description, that is armored and protects the crew. So, pretty much all of these... Okay, so... Arguably, these are not tanks by modern standards because they're more like... They're more like infantry, like APCs almost, or like infantry vehicles, anti-infantry vehicles. But I'm not going to use them anyway. They were considered tanks in World War II, but they haven't got main guns. They've just got machine guns, so they're just they kind of don't fit the modern tank rule because they haven't got a proper gun. But I'm not going to use them anyway because they were considered tanks during the war, so that's fine. You know, likewise, we have the flame tank that doesn't have a main gun. It's got a flamethrower, but it does meet all the other requirements for a tank, so we won't be using that either. Now, in the tank category, you'll see here that we have a flame half-track and a bridge half-track. These are not tanks. It's arguable by modern standards as to whether this is a tank or not because it hasn't got a main gun. And I don't even think the turret rotates that much on these flame tanks. But this is definitely not a tank. This is a half-track with flamethrowers. Looks like 3 flamethrowers built into the infantry section. So this is usable if we want. It's not very good though. Scout cars are probably better, so it's highly debatable whether we would use it or not. Pretty much everything else here is a tank. The Ost-N almost looks like an assault gun, but I don't think it is. I'm pretty sure it's a tank. And everything else here is a tank. Once again, there's arguments to be had for certain things that have just machine guns, but they were pretty much considered tanks at the time. This is not a tank. It's complete garbage and I would never use it. But this gives you some idea as to something that is in the tank category that's not a tank. That is a machine gun car. It's there's no rotating turret on this horrible thing. They actually call these tankettes, or I think it's tankettes. I think the official term for them is tankettes or something from the time. But by modern standards, this is not a tank. Good old KV-2. We will not be using artillery tanks. They're still tanks. So, KV-2 can be put into artillery mode. But we won't be using it because it's still a tank. It meets all the requirements. It's got a main gun. Admittedly, it's a howitzer, but it has a main gun. It has a fully enclosed turret that fully rotates. It's got treads. It's heavily armored and it protects the crew. It meets all the criteria, so we won't be using it. Even though it comes with an artillery mode. Potentially usable, the M3 Lee. It's not strictly speaking a tank. Because it doesn't have a turret. Not a proper one, anyway. It's closer to a tank destroyer than it is a tank. By the British standards of tank destroyers, it doesn't have a turret. It's pretty much that's the issue. By modern standards, more considered to be a tank destroyer than a tank. But obviously, every article that you look at will call the M3 Lee a tank because at the time it was a tank, or considered to be a tank. But if you built something like this now, it would probably be more considered a tank destroyer than a tank. Well, you just wouldn't build something like this now because it's rubbish. But I won't be using it anyway. And that's it. So the long story short is that the only things usable in this category are these two. Because this is not a tank. This is just not a tank, full stop. And neither is this. But this is an anti-infantry flame tank, and this is a bridging device. But we may see non-tanks creep into this category, so we'll have to keep an eye on it. Okay. We won't be, although I don't think I would, but we won't be using the Panzer IIF because it's a tank. So even though it's in the recon category, it's still a tank. So we won't be touching this. Although, once again, the argument could be made by modern standards that it's more of an IFV, but then again, that's more of an argument to be made for the Matilda than anything else. If you're gonna argue by role, it's got a what we would consider to be a main gun. So, and it does have a rotating turret, so it's a tank. It is a tank. Most of the stuff in here would not be considered a tank because it's not tracked. This is arguably a tank. Really horrible early war thing, but anyway. The weird stuff is all early war and we wouldn't use it anyway. Now, this is where things get interesting. There are some tanks in this category. However, I don't think I have any yet. So the issue, what makes all of this usable is the fourth rule. So tracks, they've all got tracks, or most of them have got tracks, so that's fine. Most of them have got a main gun, and they have a turret. Not for most of them, the turret does not rotate though, so they would come out on that rule. But the other rule is that they have it's an enclosed environment that fully protects the crew. While those that have a fully enclosed environment that fully protects the crew do not have a turret. And those that have got a turret do not have a fully enclosed environment that fully protects the crew. So all of these are not tanks. But some of them are really on the line, like the Elephant. The Elephant is all but a tank, except for the fact that it does not have a turret. So I will almost certainly use it because why wouldn't I? I need to use anti-tank if I'm not using tanks. But we just got to watch out for tanks that creep into the anti-tank category. It doesn't look like there are any in here though. This doesn't have a this turret doesn't rotate. Not that we would use it anyway, but once again, this is no rotating turret. So I think we're pretty much good to go on this category. Anti-aircraft guns. I haven't seen any tanks in this category. Ooh. I think this is open-topped. So it's okay because of the fourth rule. It doesn't protect the crew. It isn't fully enclosed and protects the crew. But these kind of anti-aircraft guns are dangerously close to being categorized as tanks. So we'll have to keep an eye on that as well. I may even have to bring up Wikipedia articles and see if certain things are enclosed or not. And there is the possibility for tanks to creep into the artillery category as well. Like this. This is a tank. It meets all the rules. It's tracked. It's fully enclosed and protects the crew. It has a turret that rotates, and it has a main gun. So, this is a tank. We can't use it, even if it's in the artillery class. Not that I had planned to use it, but it meets the criteria, so it will not be used. Same for the Crusader. I think the SU... I think this bit is fully enclosed and it rotates. I'm not 100% sure, actually. I'd have to double check it. But there are definitely the possibilities of finding tanks in the artillery category as well, so we'll have to be careful. And then obviously aircraft are aircraft, so... I will be enforcing the no tanks rule vigorously throughout this campaign. Anything that might be considered a tank. Fortunately for me, recon cars are mostly wheeled, so they get away with not being tanks. Right. Let's finish with our anti-aircraft guns. I haven't got lethal attack. I haven't got anti-air veteran. So... what I do want is camo. There it is. Can you actually use the anti-tank class, dude? Doesn't look like it. Interesting. Ah, 0 slots is here to be mixed with other heroes, so I can actually do consolidation as well. First aid and consolidator, this would be amazing. Interestingly, or amusingly, I don't think I have enough... I don't have enough 43 grade infantry to actually run a full stack here, so... yeah, can I convert them? Would it let me? No. No, it would not. Okay, we'll have to stick with our early war infantry with this for now. Okay, so there's a huge hole in my... I never bothered with anti-tanks throughout the whole war. Largely because they're rubbish, but... or they were rubbish. I am now in the uncomfortable position of not having much in the way of anti-tank. So I have to actually, for this campaign, I have to buy some anti-tank. I do have the whole... I have the Elephant here. $30 heart attacks, pretty nasty. Let's make sure to put field repairs on this because I haven't got many. And something... I think readiness is pretty solid. Just so that it can really defend itself if it's attacked directly. Okay, what else do I want from my anti-aircraft guns while I'm here? Aiming assistance is good on them so that they can just be in the right place at the right time. Supporting their team. Let's go with unyielding on the anti-aircraft guns, in case the strategic bombers try and wear them out. Actually makes sense for anti-aircraft guns, because the usual trick with enemy aircraft is to bomb anti-aircraft guns with a strat bomber to suppress them, or use artillery to suppress them and then bring your aircraft in and deal damage. Unyielding is actually quite situationally useful for an AA. Okay, no tanks. How much this is my no retaliation infantry. These guys have got the wrong camo. It does not have the does not have artillery artillery support, so it should not be yellow. Although I was using yellow for readiness, wasn't I, at one point? Soft support. I should use a different thing for readiness. Right, let's pull that off. Ah, yeah, I forgot about that. That's actually a very good reason for this to not be engineers. That's why I had them as heavies. The only issue is their speed. I want self-repair, but these guys will be slow. Right, let's get rid of this recon car. Let's use one of these. Go with first aid, double attack, which will trigger first aid repeatedly, which is nice. Go with some readiness. Alright, let's pick a color for readiness, so we know. I think I used brown for tough units before, but let's go with... what should we go with? Let's go with black. Can't confuse that with anything else. Dark blue and black. It's dark green. There we go. That'll do. So our readiness units are black, so we know that we can position them such. I made the one unit that's not that. It's this one. Okay. Recons. No retaliation because obviously retaliation usually results in dead recons. Distraction is useful. I think I've got a couple of distractions. There's quite a few hit and runs here. Alright. So they've all got distraction, so I can use them to switch off enemy AT and artillery as needed. Which is going to be important for me, because I've got no tanks. It won't be so important for the enemy. What else? Overrun on a recon. Wouldn't that be fun? I mean, to be fair, what else would I put overrun on? I could put it on one of my artilleries and get the old delete key going. Let's put overrun on this one. Is there a stripe version of this camo? Don't think that there is really. Just something to remind me that it can actually overrun. Instead of me needing to check it every time. I guess not. I guess there's no red stripe version of this camo. Or maybe a no. I'm like a slightly different version of the camo. A camo that's similar. So every country had its own weird idea of what camo was going to work. It's kind of funny. It's not like there was any consensus on what the best camo was. I know it also depends quite heavily on theatre and such, but you know what, that'll do. It'll remind me that this one can overrun. I might use it for steamrolling. As best as it can steamroll. Might be useful for cleaning up infantry. Right then. We're almost out of slots as well, so we won't be adding much more. In fact, we're probably just better off over strengthening these. Okay. Ignores entrenchment. That will help with the no retaliation strikes. Wonder if I have another one of those lying around. I'm pretty sure I do. And there it is. Perfect, so I can use this one for overruns, and I can use these two for unpicking enemies from entrenched positions. I'm hoping not to change my my setup that much between missions. Okay, now it's just simple deployment. So when you deploy here, you're just running away at the start of your turn. I'm almost tempted to just not deploy there. Okay. There's our recons, our 2 anti-tanks, our artillery, which we may in the future be not utilizing. And I do not have enough space for all of this. I think if I put the recon here, it should be able to get away without too much trouble. Okay. The stage is set for Core 2. No tanks. And I hope you guys enjoy this campaign, because it's definitely gonna be interesting to see how I can survive with no tanks in the phase of the war, in the part of the war where the tanks really start to take over. And more importantly, in the part of this game where tanks become great against everything. And it will be a little while until anti-tank guns and aircraft sort of ramp up to destroy tanks. So, it's going to be an interesting one. I hope you guys enjoy it, and I will see you in the first episode. In the first, you know, actually playing, not deploying episode. See you then.